As my school district begins a path down a one-to-one iPad pathway to personalized learning for all of our students, I begin to think about how the instructional tools that I experienced as a student are different from the instructional tools that we're offering our students today. As you can see up here on the screen are the instructional tools from my education, and if we could just do a quick poll, if you could raise your hand if you recognize any of those items up there on the screen from your childhood. All right, so I see many in the audience are in agreement with me. Paper and pencil and the chalkboard were kind of the gold standards of my teachers, the go-to tools that they used all of the time. The third item up there, most of our students today don't recognize. Sometimes they misidentify it as a sewing machine. It's actually a film strip projector, and back in first grade, I was the student who got to sit next to it and push the little button every time the beep went off in the recording. So even back then, I knew I wanted to have a career in instructional technology. The fourth item at the end of the row up there is the mimeograph, the original copy machine. When you turned the crank on it, it churned out reams of blue and green scented worksheets. And no matter how long those worksheets sat in piles, they were always warm, scented, and oh so very comforting as you practiced your math facts. But then along came the Scantron machine, and it made giving tests so much easier for my teachers. They could score those tests, analyze the scores, and test and retest over and over. And sometimes that wasn't so motivating to students, and those Scantron forms ended up being Christmas tree designs and other pieces of artwork that didn't quite reflect our learning. I really love my gadgets and devices, and even back then, I was a little bit of a nerd, and so my first graphing calculator in junior high was one of my favorite tools. I was the student who always finished my math work early and turned the calculator upside down to see how many words I could spell from the numbers, and so all those extra symbols on the graphing calculator opened a whole new world of learning opportunities for me in terms of new words that I could spell. And then that last tool on the screen at the end of the line, I was fortunate enough to have access to that both at school and at home. While I was at school, we played a lot of educational games on that computer. And again, by a show of hands, if you could hold your hand up, if you think you can have a pretty good guess what the title of that software was that we played the most at school. Absolutely, Oregon Trail. So give yourself a point if that was your answer. I recently read that Oregon Trail is kind of like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon of the educational world. So 1 in every 4 people that you meet will have either played Oregon Trail or knows what it is at least. In fact, it was so popular in the educational world that it spanned 3 generations of students. Over 30 years, this game endured in the educational world for our students. If I compare what was in my backpack back then, maybe a few different notebooks with different colored covers, and of course, my trusty graphing calculator, to what our students have in their backpacks today, there's no comparison between what I had as instructional tools and the myriad of digital devices that can do advanced functions that we're offering to our students today. Now, there are some people who are concerned about the amount of games that students might download, things like Candy Crush and Angry Birds. And because of that concern, they can't see the immense possibility that these digital devices offer to our students to transform their learning and education. To start thinking about why we need to change the way that we're teaching, let's take a quick look at the timeline of our recent graduates, the class of 2014. Give or take, most of them were born somewhere around 1996 or 1997. That means at the ripe old age of 1, Google came along and put a world of information at our fingertips. At the age of 4, the original Apple click-wheel iPod emerged, allowing people to put their entire collection of digital music on it and carry that music along in their pocket so that they'd always have their beats with them. At the age of 5, the first flip phones with cameras emerged, allowing everyone to become a digital photographer and document every single event of their lives, no matter how insignificant. Then at the age of 7, a series of social media giants such as Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter came along, allowing people to quickly and easily be able to post those selfies, videos, and daily news updates that people wanted to share with their family, friends, and even strangers. And then at the age of 10, the first Apple iPhone entered onto the market, followed shortly by the first Android phone, allowing everyone to get connected, make their phone calls, surf the internet, play music, and send email, all with one single small pocket-sized device. And it wasn't until 2010 when our students first saw that 21st century tools could be used for something more than playing games or playing music, as they saw that a political campaign leveraged social media through mobile devices to change the world. And this, in fact, inspired a whole new generation that believed in change. And then along came the first iPad, the first digital device that was small enough to fit in a student's backpack, but versatile enough to start to transform the educational world. Over the past few years, a lot of research has been released showing that due to the proliferation of digital devices and exposure to multimedia, audio, and visuals that our students have encountered, the way that they take in information, store that information, access the information, and then use the information is entirely different than the way myself or anyone of previous generations would access and store information. That has to make us wonder then that when our almost always on students come to school with their 21st century digital devices, and we as educators ask them to power down those devices and put them in their backpacks, how does that affect their learning? What we should be doing instead is we should be thinking about how we can put a digital device, such as an iPad, in every single student's hands, so that they can leverage the power of that device and interrupt the practices of bring your own device to school that often create a digital divide and cause our students to fall behind. Instead, we should be thinking about how we can build the digital literacy skills of our students to start including problem solving, collaboration, communication, social responsibility into our curriculum to empower our students so that they can use those devices to learn. In his TED Talk, when Sir Ken Robinson was talking about reforming education, what he said is that we don't need an evolution, we need a revolution in order to change and transform our schools. With the advent and entrance of the iPads and other digital devices, we finally have a device that can start that revolution, a device that can transform students' learning in new ways to connect them with classmates across the district, across the state, across the nation, and around the world in ways that they've never been able to do before, ways that can engage and empower our students in a whole new era of learning. In addition to putting iPads into the hands of every single one of our teachers and students, we should start thinking about how we need to remodel our teaching and learning environments of our schools so that we can maximize instructional use of those spaces. That means that we need to think about how we can move away from straight rows of desks in both our classrooms, our hallways, our media centers, so that students can work together, they can collaborate, they can explore ideas, they can display those ideas and access digital information before, during, and after school. We need to start learning from some of the giants of the business world. Companies like Google that allow their employees to work in more socially oriented spaces where they can work together, share ideas, and collaborate. And other companies such as General Mills that allow their employees to choose their seating for the day based on whether or not they need single isolated spaces that allow them to do more intense thinking or if they need spaces that allow for more collaboration and brainstorming with their teams. We need to employ these spaces to allow for more student performance, more flexible learning environments, and more classrooms with glass walls, so that we're not isolating our students or our education, but rather we're allowing more sharing of good teaching and learning across the buildings. We can also employ personalized learning, which is based on tailored instruction and learning supports, more student voice and choice and engagement in a technology-rich environment, combined with culturally responsive teaching, which is based on the pillars of rigor, realness, responsibility, and relationships. That, coupled with digital devices and re-envisioning our learning environments, can empower our students as never before to give them more freedom in their learning opportunities. As one-to-one devices enter the world of education, we can learn from researchers like Dr. Mizuko Ito, who researched how teens are using the internet and social media. She found that they mostly fall into two categories. One group of students uses social media and the internet around friendship-driven activities. So things like posting on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and trying to connect with other students that are their similar age, similar geographic location, and are interested in the same types of activities. The second group, which is more relevant for education, is the interest-driven use of the internet. In this case, we see a lot of students going online to join forums and user groups on things that aren't commonly taught in school. Things like photography, videography, Minecraft. The hours of time that they spend trying to learn from these experts online is amazing. And if we could figure out how to harness that interest-driven use of the internet and the hours that our screenagers, our teens, tweens, and even younger students spend staring at screens, large and small, every day, if we could harness that energy and employ it toward our more traditional school subjects, think about the impact that could have on a student's education. One such student, Matt Pern, engaged in an interest-driven activity such as this. He was inspired at the age of 13 by a video that he saw on YouTube of someone playing a Led Zeppelin song on guitar. The person played all the notes backward and in the middle of the video reversed the footage and played it at 2 times the speed so that the song sounded correctly. He set out to do a similar activity himself. He planned to lip sync to a Queen song over 3 years' time. That involved a lot of planning for over 2,200 photos. 2 photos a day to show himself progressing in age over time, and in the middle of the video, following that same pattern of reversing in age, all the while coordinating exactly what his mouth needed to look like in order to be lip syncing that song correctly. So 3 years of time he spent on this, 2 photos every day, planning to be in exactly the same position to match up with his position the day before his photo, and making sure his mouth was correct to make the lip syncing look right. A lot of planning. He spent 3 years on this, over 2,200 photos. It's now been posted on YouTube and has received over 2.3 million views. Again, think about the impact that could have on a student's traditional subject learning in school if we could figure out how to harness that sort of time commitment from our students. If we start combining student interest with 21st century tools such as 3D printers, we can allow our students to create intricate devices with moving departments and engage in activities similar to engineers, designers, and architects. They can use multimedia and content creation tools on iPads to create videos, to learn documentary and journalism skills, to go out and document the progress of the Green Line down University Avenue and its impact on the business world, and then post those videos online to share with community, family, and people around the world. They can also engage in complex engineering and computer programming tasks. If we could just figure out, as educators, how mind-blowing it is of all the jobs that are coming along today that didn't exist even 5 years ago. Things like iOS developers, user interface and user experience designers, millennial generational experts. How can we prepare our students for the careers that will be ready for them when they're ready to enter the real world? What we need to do is actually, as adults, have our own digital backpack with our own digital tools, and we need to, as Kevin Honeycutt says, join our students on the digital playground so that we can leverage those devices for our students' future success today. Thank you.